Why don't you start this one, Jacob? And I'll.
Why me?
I don't know.
I don't have host qualities.
Oh, I think you do. I think you're selling yourself short because we're
No.
talking about Hostel today, 2006, right? Or 2005 or 2006.
2005, 2005.
Yeah, I think it came out. Like it premiered somewhere in 2005, and then it went to American theaters in like I think it was a January movie. I think it came out.
I wouldn't be surprised. I saw a lot of reviews saying like along with Devil's Rejects, so I would presume in the 2005, 2006.
That this movie reminds me of being 15 years old. I remember like skipping school to see this movie. I really, really liked Cabin Fever. And I remember skipping school to see Hostel. And I think I saw Hostel in theaters when I was 15, like, oh God, three times at least. Uh, which is fine because I think it's a really good movie if you are a 16-year-old. I mean, it has it has enduring qualities, but nothing. Watching it at 16 or 15 years old in the mid 2000s, I think, is the most optimum time to experience Hostel or any Eli Roth property, probably, which is why he's uh, kind of fallen. Would you say he's fallen off lately?
I mean, my introduction to him was Knock Knock, and I fucking loved Knock Knock. So
I
I
think you
don't
are
know.
in a minority there.
Yeah, I probably am. Me and one buddy of mine are.
Yeah, not sure if he's fallen off or he's had like somehow a hell of a problem making movies since Hostel 2 or something.
Um, yeah, I mean, there was Green Inferno.
I remember that
He,
being plagued with like delays and reshoots, all
I wouldn't
sorts
be
of shit.
surprised. He also did that one. It was like a studio movie, like a kids movie with Jack Black. Um, I don't know if you knew about that.
Nope, did not
Yeah,
know
he
about
did
that.
like it's something like the house with the clock in its wall, something like that. It
Oh,
has like
okay.
Jack Black. Yeah, it's one of those kids movies like CG infused, like Hugo type movie. Haunted house.
It sounds like
Uh,
he tried to do like a Linklater Jack Black one for them, one for me, one, but they were like, no, this isn't for us. We don't want this.
yeah, and now he's working on the Borderlands movie, which is
Hey, he's got the mentality, like I'm saying, like
I
he
was
is a
I had that exact conversation with someone last night. Like,
he's a
who
perpetual like teenager, like with who ingested way too much Monster Energy drinks, and I mean, Hostel is like jugs, drugs, and gore is what the movie is essentially. Um, it's stuff that you would love when you were 16. But that doesn't mean that it's not saying some interesting things. But we're gonna run through it here, right? I mean, um,
we can't
um,
really go death by death because there's only
no,
like two deaths, three deaths in the movie or something like that. Well, I guess there's the quote unquote villains near the end, but like in terms of like the main characters getting slaughtered, there's only two.
yeah, and yeah, and I'm not taking any like. If you are an Eli Roth fan watching this, that's fine. I think I'll always be an Eli Roth fan, just like I'll always listen to Blink
And
182. You know, like it's
well,
it's
don't
in me.
worry.
It's there.
I was gonna say don't worry because I discovered Eli Roth like at the ripe age of 21. So I'm
Yeah,
a,
I
I'm
think
I'm late to
that's
the
too
party,
old.
and yeah, and I'm like this guy's great. But
like
no,
like
Eli
now
Roth's
I watch
super
it and I'm
interesting.
like, oh god, that nudity is gratuitous. But when I was 16, I was like, fuck yeah, Eli Roth is a legend right now. Like
Well,
it was different. It was very different.
it's he is a really interesting filmmaker. Like you've referred to this era as the return,
Yeah.
like the return to like the era of like Friday the 13th movies and stuff like that.
Mhm.
And I do more than anything, I think what drew me to Eli Roth, again after watching Knock Knock, and also Green Inferno, which was my second Eli Roth, was he's the kind of guy who really, really, really wants to have his cake and eat it too. And he's more than willing to come off like entirely reactionary, entirely poor taste, but in service of something that he sincerely believes is a noble cause. And I kind of respect that more than anything. Like,
Well,
just
yeah, what you just said is like why I've like I liked Eli Roth a lot when I was a teenager, but I never liked Rob Zombie,
mm,
and they were like making these movies at the same time.
yeah, and there
Um,
is a similarity, but also
there's something about like I feel like Eli Roth is a lot more willing to eat shit, you know, like
the the way I said it to a friend, and for the record, I still prefer Zombie between the two, but I said Zombie is I guess more interested in like pain or like just like
yeah,
putting people through suffering, whereas Eli is more into just the provocative quality of the text itself, like the
and
concept itself is provoking people and upsetting people.
absolutely. But you
Yeah.
nailed it with like reactionary, because I would call Hostel one of the most reactionary movies I've seen, not just to not just to the war on terror or whatever. You just said like zombies your favorite out of those two. My favorite out
Yeah.
of the entire Return is probably James Wan,
Yeah.
who made Saw like a year before this, I think.
Yeah, and
And
there were of course similar comparisons being made at
I
the
think
time.
Hostel is a direct reaction to Saw,
Yeah.
but I feel like what separates James Wan. I'm sure James Wan is a big horror fan, but Eli Roth and Rob Zombies are they're like the Quentin Tarantinos of the horror genre.
Yes.
They're they always say I don't know if they always say it, but I'm pretty sure I can dig up quotes where both of them go, "I'm a fan first and a director second." I'm sure I can dig up those quotes.
Yeah. You definitely definitely with Rob. Rob just likes to talk about movies, although he doesn't really have the Tarantino Roth energy, where
Well, Tarantino
they
produced this movie. We wouldn't have
oh,
it without.
absolutely. He's the reason it got made, more or
Yeah,
less, because he Eli Roth was, I think, at the time offered to do the Texas Chainsaw remake or the Last House on the Left remake, and he turned them down. And Tarantino convinced him to do something his own, and he wrote this and put it through the rewrites and all that with Tarantino, standing over his shoulder, telling him, giving him advice. So that's kind of how it came to be. So this is definitely like in the Tarantino club,
yeah.
although.
And so far as Roth's career goes, I think Cabin Fever is a lot more like a return movie. I think it was like 2002. It was a bit early for the return, but it was on that track. And Hostel is
Yes.
still a return, but it's definitely one of the quintessential torture porn movies for sure. For sure.
Yeah. And we were talking
Um,
about, but aesthetically, this movie is bizarre. Like the leaps it goes through. Because I would say it starts as like a comedy, and I really mean like I don't just necessarily mean in the tone. I mean like the way it's filmed feels like a
yeah,
comedy, but only for the first half, only for the first like 30 minutes. Because and for the record, I'm not the first probably to point that out. I don't think I am, but like the second half turns into like a Korean horror movie, or like aesthetically, or like I did look up interviews where he was talking about how at the time he was doing the festival circuit for Cabin Fever, and so he was exposed to Asian movies at the time. So like
yeah.
um, Old Boy and
Well,
Takashi
shit. When
Miike,
I
who of course
was
appears in the movie.
Yeah, about to say when I was 15 sitting there, like the only reason I know Takashi Miike is, or the first time I learned about him was when I was 15 and watching Hostel and
Yeah, there's
wondering why
scenes,
they insisted on him so much, and then I looked him up.
and you can tell like this is made by someone who loves Ichi the Killer, or
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think he's a fan of Audition, if I remember
I
correctly.
was talking to Justin, and I was like, is Takashi Miike like the spiritual like godfather of torture porn for things like Audition in what 99 or 2000? Like, is he
It's
the
so hard
true
to say.
godfather? It
It's
is
so
hard to
hard to
say.
say, just because of how I don't want to say incoherent, but like strange his traits as like a director. I have a friend who calls him an anti-auteur because of just like how bizarre his output is and how much he changes between movies. But I can definitely
True.
see him, if only because of the people he inspired,
It
with
has to
like a
be an
select.
inspiration because I'm
Yeah.
not being like American like centric here, but I do see torture porn like largely as a reaction to 9/11 and beheading videos.
Oh yeah,
Um,
you can't. I cannot find like a single either contemporary or later on assessment of Hostel that doesn't talk about like Abu Ghraib and
Yeah.
9/11. Like it's impossible to find. It's every single write-up on this film mentions those things, and it's so obvious why. Even Eli talks about it. The same interview I watched, Eli goes on for like 5 minutes about how much he hates Bush, and like it's clear where his mind was at when he was making this. It's clear where everyone's mind was at when they were making these movies. Him, Zombie, all of them. It was such a weird time for
Yeah.
horror.
Yeah, most certainly. And I do like the pace of the movie, even though it is kind of weird. But you were talking about the visuals, and
Yes,
when it
it goes
does
on for like
shift, like I don't really like the way the beginning looks, but when it does shift and does that noticeable tonal shift, there are some amazingly shot scenes, amazing sets too.
it's kind
Uh,
of weird how I don't notice the shift either. It happens very cleanly, I think.
it really does. It really does. And well, I mean, well, let's get into some characters and we can talk about
Yeah, sure. Our
things
wonderful
from there.
people, her, the ever heroic Josh.
Oh, Josh, Jesus Christ. Um,
His best move, I think, in the movie. I mean, like Eli Roth's best move was Josh, I think. Like, Josh is great. Josh is just such a piece of shit.
I think they're all pieces of shit. Like you and
Yeah.
I, like somewhat ironically like the piece of shit characters in
Oh,
these
we do.
movies.
We do. We love them. We love
Like
them.
Carter in Final Destination, or like Parker and Damon in like Urban Legend. You know, that's all these guys are. There's no redeeming friend. There's only three of
Yeah.
them at the same time, but it's like the three asshole frat boys from every '90s movie in one.
Yeah, and but I still think like it's easier to like Paxton and Ollie than it is to like Josh, just
Oh, it's
because
way
like
easier to like
because they're
Paxton.
honest about being douchebags. They own it, whereas Josh is a douchebag and pretends he's normal. Like
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's why he'd be the nice guy. He'd be our Damon Brooks here, probably.
yes, that's why I think Josh is the quintessential Eli Roth character of this movie. Because if there's one thing Eli Roth hates, it's like insincere people, I
Well, he's
guess.
absolutely punished, but I also feel that the film is slightly,
Inconsistent
um,
about it.
well, deliberately problematic or conservative about his sexuality.
Yeah. Oh, yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah. Absolutely.
because they they really insist on the idea that he doesn't want to just have meaningless sex with a prostitute. It looks like he really enjoys the sex with Natalia, but Eli Roth isn't above, making you think that maybe there's some repressed urges inside of him, that like maybe he's not necessarily interested in women,
Yes.
for sure. Which kind of plays into like it's kind of for me mature for Eli Roth was the psychosexual weird dynamic between him and who would end up being his killer.
Mm.
Um, I
Yeah,
forgot
yeah,
his
yeah.
fucking name, but
I don't think they name him. I think he's left unnamed in the movie.
yeah, it's just those are some good, because I remember the whole thing that is kind of neat that Roth did was like do the whole reversal of, I think Josh like overreacts to the dude touching his leg in the train,
Yes, yeah, 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 yeah.
and
It's
it's a noticeable overreaction. So he like screams like a child, and then when he sees him later at the bar, Josh touches his leg and like recoils in embarrassment for touching his leg. Like it's for Eli Roth, that's interesting, but that's also like plays into the fact that like these are also like three pretty homophobic characters too,
yes, yeah.
based on their
Pretty
actions and language and
unambiguously
gesture.
homophobic as well, might I add.
Yeah, yeah, a lot of slurs just thrown around, but that's also what the year 2005 or 6 was too.
Oh yeah.
Like that, like you said, it's just American Pie humor. That's
Yeah, it
it.
reminds me a lot of movies that I remember friends showing me in the
Yeah, it
early
comes from
2000s
an
when I was a
era
kid.
where it comes from an era where the big laughs were forcing two straight dudes to kiss each other. Like
Yes.
that's this era of comedy. And
Yes.
Josh, Josh, I don't like Josh at all.
Me neither.
Paxton though, like Jay Hernandez, I think is a good actor. I don't know,
Yeah.
because I have no other reason for caring about him all of a sudden out of nowhere. Like
It's really cool. It's really cool. I love that Paxton And because the thing is that you think Paxton's gonna die second. You really
Yeah,
think
he
Ollie's.
I think successfully psychoed it with the Janet Leigh death. You don't think it's Josh is the sensitive one.
Yeah, he's the main character. He's the one that gets the most screen time or the most interiority in the first half. And
Hmm.
the even the way it's shot, Josh is always in, you know, closer to the camera. Paxton's always far away from the camera. He's always like kind of secondary in the frame. Whenever they show the shots where they're having sex in the same room, it's Paxton in the background. He's like in the
Yeah.
back. He's doing his own thing. You don't know, what's on his mind. It doesn't matter. Josh is the one with like interiority and nuance, and then he fucking dies
Well,
45
he
minutes
does
into the
that straight
movie.
up to the end. Like they're both drugged at the club
Yes,
that night,
yes.
and it does show like Josh passing out in the hotel bed. But the last thing we see is like Jay Hernandez making a wrong turn that actually saved his life, and like going into like a storeroom closet instead of the bathroom, and the door gets locked behind him, and he passes out. And then you expect when we fade back in, it's him sitting in the torture chair, but it's not. It's Josh. Like even like we follow it all the way up to that point even, and we're going to talk more about Paxton and Josh, but
We have to talk about the hero of the movie.
of course, my horse, we have to talk about Oli, the king of the swing. Am I right?
King of the Swing. I love him. I love how the whole point of his character is that he's a fucking weirdo who somehow is most attractive to every woman they meet. Every person they meet just loves Ollie. It's great.
Oh,
I
Ollie's got a lot of energy with him. Oh my god.
he's an absent father going backpacking with a bunch of college guys he met somewhere.
Yep. Yep. But now I'm like 30 years old and I'm watching this and I'm like, oh shit. I mean, I suppose I'm Ollie.
What I mean, you don't know how old he is, so I assume he's probably older than you.
He looks pretty old to me.
Yeah,
He has an off-screen death though, but we will like specifically talk about these deaths because I think that all
of
the
course.
deaths that we do see are legitimately good.
Yes, yeah,
Um,
I agree.
like on
Especially
fire.
especially the last few.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Josh's death is the one that sticks with me.
Well,
Um,
because it's the centerpiece of the movie and it's the only real scene of actual, I would say, what is termed torture porn. It's the only one that
mhm.
really fits that bill in the movie. It's
Yeah.
funny how little violence there is in this movie outside of like a few moments. It's like you get that centerpiece and then you get the end of the movie and like the last 10 minutes and that's about it. But it's enough. I think anyway, it's enough.
Just good like sound design and good editing. There's this
Yeah.
one specific cut in it that makes me just cringe deeply, and
Is it
it's the toe about to be cut.
that's what I thought it was. Yeah.
Yeah, it shows like a toe about to just be like cut in half, and then it cuts really quick right when the toe is about to be cut to the Asian girl cutting her nails in
Yeah, it's a
the
very
lobby.
good cut. Very, very good cut.
Asian girl, probably the most likable character in this whole
Yeah.
thing. If we're just talking about like
Sh-
poor
Her
person, oh my god.
yeah, her fate is the saddest. Um,
And her fate is the one I actually hear talked about like the most.
Really, I didn't see much on it.
Like my girlfriend's really into horror movies, or I should say I hear a lot of like maybe women talking about that scene. I don't know. I can at least think of three, and that's like a lot for me. I've met like three girls in my life, and they all seem to talk about this one death, and it's a cool death. Like she looks in the mirror and notices that she's not notices, but sees the length of her deformity,
Yeah.
um, and would rather die than have to live that way.
I mean, it makes sense to sympathize with her the most because the whole
Hmm.
point of the movie is, of course, that you're punishing these idiot Americans for being idiot Americans who are insensitive to other countries and, you know, are dumb misogynists, and you're punishing them, and then you have this person who's just caught in the crossfire and has nothing to do with any of it. She's
Yeah,
just punished for being there at the wrong time.
I mean
So
it's an understandable like kind of death too. I guess it
yeah,
plays on the concept, or I mean maybe it's a fact that like even in death, like women in particular will most likely not destroy their fucking face.
Yeah.
Um, and it's like, and then you know what I mean. They'd rather like I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. They'd rather take sleeping pills or cut their wrists. I'm like, I don't know how definitive and absolutist I want to sound about this, but just plays on that primal insecurity or fear of well shit, look at the way I look now. I want to jump in front of this bus. I mean, this is it. I can't even see, and half of my face is gone. The guy who did that to her is a fascinating little character. Um,
Oh yeah, 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 yeah. That guy.
I think his
That
name
guy.
is like Rick Hoffman, the actor who did that. And that's so much exposition, by the way, and like
It's the
congratulations to that
Tarantino
actor.
scene. It's the
It
Tarantino
is.
scene.
That's the Tarantino scene.
It's the scene where I was watching. I was like, this was the Tuesday that Tarantino was sitting in the room with Eli while he was typing away.
How
Like
much
that
money you want to bet that Tarantino considered
wrote it.
playing that role?
Oh, played it. Yeah, I bet he wanted to.
He considered it. I'm
Because
telling you.
Eli's in this. Eli's in this as a stoner.
Yeah, yeah, he is.
But I'm wouldn't be surprised if Quentin actually is in this movie as one of the masked guys. But regardless, yeah, no, that scene's so weird. Because that's from that point of the movie onward, for me, it was just constant tension because I sincerely thought that Paxton was just gonna get capped before the end of the movie.
It
Um,
is a competent screenplay because, like, even just rewatching it today, you know, it takes a lot of heroism to go back. He was scot free. He was home free. He could have
yeah.
left after talking to that guy, and he even said the thing of like you know the guy's like, should I go slow or like should I make it quick, you know? And he's like, make it quick. And he's like, oh fuck that, I'm gonna go scorch earth on this. Fuck this gun, it's too fucking American or whatever.
Yeah.
But I think anybody else would have left. But it's a pretty competent screenplay, and the idea that I always forget about the I guess the save the cat moment for Paxton comes when Josh is still alive and Josh talks out of like seemingly nowhere about this girl who drowned in front of him and he couldn't
Yeah.
save her.
Yeah.
And he's definitely like having flashbacks to that a traumatic moment from his youth, and he's not going to let it happen again. And I'm like, okay, this is pretty competent screenplay because they don't like repeat it. You know, they don't bring it up again, but it's like if you remember that scene, that monologue, then you understand why he went back in there.
I think that sums up a lot of the most interesting parts of the film is that he doesn't really tell it to you. It's more just what the images remind you of. And a lot of it, I wouldn't call him a subtle director by any stretch of the
Oh no,
imagination, but
no.
I'll say he doesn't tell it to you. You know, he's not a person who describes to you what the movie is about in the
Well,
movie.
I
He
will
lets the
tell you, I,
images do
I
it.
feel like Rob Zombie would have shown us brief glimpses of a little child drowning in a fucking
Yeah,
lake
he
in front
would.
of him.
He would. He does that a lot. Like flashback shots, like
Yeah,
intercut
which is
flashback shots. That's a
why I
that's
might
a
prefer.
common.
Another reason I might prefer Roth a little bit.
It
Um,
depends on the movie. I think there's a particularly good use of that effect in Halloween 2, a very effective use of it in that film. But otherwise, it depends on the movie. But they're definitely different filmmakers.
but it's not bad characterization. It's like also why he's taking it so personally because I think he brings it up when Oli disappears, and
Yeah,
like his
yeah.
mind immediately goes there. And also when Josh disappears, it's just crazy. I can't do this. We have to talk about Natalia and Svetlana.
We're
Okay.
getting close to my favorite line in the movie too.
Does one of them say it?
Paxton says it actually, but he says it to them. They're it's when they tell him where Josh and Molly
Okay, I
are,
know.
and
Say it.
yeah, he said they say it's like, come on, just sit down, have a drink, and he shouts, I don't want to drink, I want to see some art, and so they show
Yes.
him some art, and it's great.
How is that not like a GIF, man? Like I was looking
It's
for that today. I
that
couldn't
that
find
was
it.
that was my favorite part of the movie was him saying, I want to see some art.
Okay.
And then they go and they immediately see Takashi Miike come out of this place. It's great.
Mm-hmm.
It's so good. It's so good. I give Eli props for that one.
I think that entire like from that point on, like the film is insane, but especially like
From that point on, you're in like Euro film territory, Euro
from that
horror
point, yeah,
territory.
of course. But I do love, let's be generous and say that it's 5 minutes that Paxton spends with the Natalia character, who I actually think is an incredibly underrated horror villain. Of course, Svetlana and Natalia are basically like sirens or bait to
Yeah,
get like horny frat boy American kids, and maybe they don't have to all be American, but that's like you pay top dollar to kill an American, so that's
yeah,
really who you
yeah.
want.
It's the cheapest is locals, then it's Europeans, then the most expensive is Americans on
Yeah,
there.
and
That's the
props to
system.
Eli Roth, I think, for hiring locally. It's set in Slovakia, and I know that the actresses who play Svetlana and Natalia, I know Natalia is a Slavic actress, so cool.
The actress that played Svetlana, I don't think she was in anything else, at least not to my knowledge. I couldn't find anything else she was in, at least film-wise.
I think Natalia was in like a Children of the Corn sequel after it.
Yeah, yeah, she was definitely in more. She was in more stuff. But no, it's great. It's great, especially because I don't know, it just works. It works. It works really well. I like it. I like
It
it
works
as the
so well
casting.
because it and she has that mid 2000s like Euro trash knockoff Monica Bellucci look to her too. Like it has that feel of like there's some sort of like trashiness to her character, which really gets revealed when you see them there. And I know it's just supposed to be. I mean, he's playing into that old shitty trope. Not even I don't know if it was a trope back then, but it sure is a trope now of like people ridiculing women by showing them without makeup. And like when you realize these
Yeah,
characters are really terrible, he like I
that
know
was
it's
the
not
most
them
Eli
without
Roth.
makeup. Yeah, I know it's not them without makeup. It's them supposed to look without makeup and making them even more hollow and like kind of have more imperfections than they most likely do. But still,
Yeah,
that's a
that's
thing
an
that
Eli
Eli did.
Rothism. That's an Eli Rothism. Again, this is the man that made Knock Knock. So,
So
what
are
are
the
we to?
cigarettes and shit. Like, he might be really self-hating. I think he wrote a lot of himself into Josh. Because I remember the
Yeah,
commentary for Hostel back when I was a kid, and him going, when Natalia lights a cigarette, he's like, "I don't care how hot you are, you smoke a cigarette. It's the most unattractive thing you could possibly do."
that's an Eliism.
It is.
That's an
I can
Eliism.
name a lot more unattractive things, but whatever. I do love that 5 minutes there when he's taking her to the exhibit, and Svetlana has a great line delivery too of like
Oh
aren't you
yeah.
coming? And she goes, I've already seen this show. Like it's really good, actually. I know I'm
There's
not
also
doing it justice, but it's very
there's
good.
also the "You're my bitch" line. It's
That's where
really
I'm
good.
going to. Is I love
Yeah.
her leading him through this, leading him into hell, basically. And the framing's really good. And I love the exterior sets. I love all the sets of where this elite hunting thing organization where the torture rooms are. I love all the sets there. And the way she like giggles like and bitch at him is perfect. But the lighting and the framing of like that line of when she says, you get me a lot of money, which makes you my bitch. And then she giggles as she like walks backwards into the shadows and he's taken away.
Yeah.
That's good. That's
It's very,
really
very
good.
good. Especially
Holy
because
shit.
again, like within 30 seconds you see Josh filleted open on a table. It's so good.
It's really good, and it actually benefits from a rewatch. It really does because then you can see like it's weird imagining Mr. Salad Fingers or whatever, the guy who kills Josh, and
Yes.
like Natalia knowing who each other are, and like they're kind of just playing with Josh in their own way.
Mm.
And it's pretty fun to like it's my turn now. I have to take him away from you. And it's like, oh man, they like know each other. This is weird.
And I do like that you're the movie aside from her doesn't really have a villain. You're led to presume it's the surgeon. I'll call him the surgeon,
Yeah,
the
I think
salad
that's
fingers,
more polite.
the salad fingers. He's definitely played up to be the villain in the same way Josh is played up to be the hero, which is to say both are red herrings.
Oh, I just thought of something. Do you think this is an Eliism too? Do you think Eli was trying to make Paxton seem more sensitive, so he made him a vegetarian out of nowhere?
No, yeah, sorry, I thought you said Josh. No, that makes sense. That makes sense.
I think it's an
I can see that.
Eliism. Like it's like he has a secret sensitivity, so
Yeah,
make him vegetarian.
it
I
might also
forgot
be a
about that.
horror movie thing because, like, a large number of horror filmmakers tend to be vegetarians.
Okay.
I don't know if Eli Roth is. I know Rob Zombie is. I don't know if Eli is, but I wouldn't be surprised. It's a common thing. Same thing with so many
But
people
sorry
watching
for
Texas
taking,
Chainsaw.
yeah, I took you off your train of thought with that
Oh, I
ridiculous
forgot my
thing.
train of thought, but
Oh well. I'm sorry.
although speaking of Texas Chainsaw, uh, definitely think that's the biggest influence here aside from Korean horror. I definitely think it. There's one direct reference to Texas Chainsaw, which is, or I think it's a direct reference, which is the guy trying to kill Paxton slipping on a banana peel and the chainsaw falls on his leg, like the end
Oh
of
yeah.
Texas Chainsaw. But also, I think the use of violence and the fact that like a movie that's purported to be a gore fest does not actually have that much violence in it. Um,
Well,
aside
not
from
that
in
it
both cases
supports
one
like
scene.
not that the evidence I'm about to provide is too supportive, but I do have pictures of him on set with the little chiclet kids wearing a Texas Chainsaw shirt.
Yeah. Oh, of course he's a fan. I have no doubt about that. Toby Hooper's all over this movie for sure, for
I
sure.
think so too. I do think there's a lot of like Euro horror influences as well.
Yeah, yeah. It's definitely in the color, I think. Color and use of location. Like got the more Asian horror, like in
Yeah.
the factory. It's I don't know what to call it. The place where they kill people. This run it looks like a set from a Kiyoshi Kurosawa movie, like Cure.
Yeah, if I
It's
remember correctly, like Tarantino and Roth were both high on that Asian horror drip.
absolutely,
Um,
yeah. Like I said, the interview I watched with him from around the time of release, he talked about how at the time he doing the festival circuit, he was allowed to see movies that don't normally make it overseas. And of course, this is, in 2021, we just go online and find it wherever.
yeah.
But like at the time for him, it was probably harder. So he was seeing stuff like Ichi the Killer, Old Boy, stuff like that. This also reminded me a bit of a movie that came out, I think, 5 years later called I Saw the Devil. It has similar vibes
Right.
for me. But yeah, it just that whole form of horror movie. It's all over this. It's all over it. But it takes a while to reveal it, though. It really does. Because the first half is just masks it really
It
well.
does, and I feel like I should give Roth some credit too, because it's not like to to me, it's not like a recontextualization of it
No,
either.
no,
It and it doesn't
it's
even feel
just
like a
homage.
Tarantinoized version of it. It doesn't. I mean, there is homage, and
No, he
but it's
just looks like
something.
he studied the literal like what is creating that effect in those movies. Not
Yeah,
like he doesn't want to make an Asian horror movie.
yeah.
He wants to make a movie that looks like Asian horror movies, and there's a huge difference there, I think. And he
I want
really
to
gets it.
like pat on the back movies like there are a lot of movies that expose just like how much of a how much the human race is selfish, a bunch of selfish pieces of shit, and they
Yeah,
all came out like pretty much following 9/11. I want to say it was like Saw, Hostel, and 28 Days Later, like movies where the discourse like among normal people was generally like would you do that?
yeah.
Like in Saw, as the sequels progressed, would eventually be like would you kill somebody to get out of this situation? Like could you cut off your own limb? In Hostel, it's like if you were that rich, would you actually kill somebody? And 28 Days Later, it's the same kind of idea. Like that was like expanded upon in The Walking Dead, and maybe that's why zombies were so big um, at that moment in time. I know it's kind of a that's kind of a non sequitur, but not really.
I mean, I would agree, although I think the intended thing for Hostel is that it's not like would you do it, it's that people did do it and
Oh,
they got caught doing it, right? And that's what he made a movie about it. Um, he he in that same interview, I keep referencing it, but it's just he talks so much in it because he's fucking Eli Roth. He talks his head off. He's like Tarantino in that way, although I think Eli Roth's a lot more interesting to listen to. Um,
Yeah, actually.
I don't know, because at this point in time in the 2000s, Tarantino was mostly just going on interviews to say like, I just think violence is cool, like, which fair. I respect him for the sincerity. I respect that like someone gives him this dilemma, like the ethical dilemma of making the kinds of movies he makes, and he's like, I don't give a fuck. But Eli Roth's answers are pretty interesting, I think, which are partly like he talks about how there's a security to the horror movie insofar as like it's obviously fiction, it's obviously fake, it's obviously staged, and that a lot of movies from before he got into it, say like the 90s, where there was kind of this security blanket of how the genre worked, but he tried to evoke stuff that was actually happening to upset people because he said, you know, it's a time in which this shit is really happening. People are
Yeah.
becoming more aware of it. And so he's making a movie that makes you think about that instead of making a movie that kind of gives you a sanitized version of what that kind of evil is like, which we've moved away from, obviously, in horror. We're kind of back into not so much the meta quality of 90s movies, but definitely I think the like kind of stylistic qualities of 90s cinema. But anyway, go on.
I can't exactly speak for Eli Roth. I do think that one of the, I think that what seems to be intended to be the lasting eerie part of the movie isn't really the idea of like torture rooms or red rooms or whatever, but more the idea that anyone can be pushed to commit like a really brutal
Oh
fucking
yeah,
murder.
for sure, for sure.
Because the
Paxton goes off the
film,
deep
yeah,
end.
Paxton goes directly off the deep end. So I mean, I think it does call into question like the morality of the audience for sure. Uh, like,
And I do think that's the most that I really think that last shot of or that last sequence of him killing the surgeon salad fingers, that is the most like Korean thing he did in the movie, like Korean horror thing
yeah,
he did in the movie, because that's an ending straight out of, again, like Old Boy or I Saw the
yeah, it's
Devil. It's
revenge, and it's
yeah.
the same way that Josh went out too, so it mirrors that of
Yeah, oh, that's
cutthroat.
a good point. I didn't think of that.
Yeah, well,
Makes sense actually.
except almost like Eli Roth gives Josh the dignity of not seeing the blood spurt out from his throat and give us a hard cut instead to black.
Yeah.
Here, like I think he either assumes or he wants us to take joy in watching just gallons of blood shoot out from this asshole's
I mean,
neck.
it's more than just blood coming out of that dude. Like,
Yeah, yeah,
pretty much every death in this movie is accompanied by, copious amounts of vomit, uh,
oh
bodily
god,
fluids, and then
like
he
it's
dies
not a
on the toilet. Like, is
not necessarily a death, but
the
Paxton's
po-
torture scene.
yeah, yeah,
Holy
that's
shit!
fucked up.
Holy
Like the dude
shit!
feels bad for him. The guy trying to kill him. He feels bad for him, so he takes the mouth thing off, the gag off. Like,
I
oh,
don't
it's
even know. He
so.
doesn't feel bad for him. He thinks he's
Or
gonna choke on his own vomit and die, and he's out like $25,000. So he
oh,
doesn't
fair
want him to
enough.
die
Yeah,
that
fair
way.
enough.
He
Fair
wants him to
enough.
live so he can torture him longer. But Jesus, when Paxton once like surprises us again, I know he hinted at it earlier that he could speak other languages, and he
Yeah,
starts speaking the dude's language, and
I
he
had to
gets
look up
visibly
what he was
shaken,
saying.
goes outside, and I remember this in theaters of like what the fuck's gonna happen. But when the big dude comes back in and like gags him, so he can't talk anymore, it's like that. Yeah, felt my heart sink in my 16-year-old chest and went,
I
oh
mean, I felt
homeboy.
that. I felt that this for the whole end because again, I kept expect for the first of all, I didn't know how long the movie had been going on because the first act feels like it goes on for a long time. So I
Yeah.
couldn't tell if I was like an hour and 15 minutes in
Well,
or 45 minutes in. But I
I
was
think that
like,
Josh dies 45 minutes in, 40
he
minutes
does.
in.
I looked it up again about it like a little bit ago before we started. It's a give or take 45 minutes, but I wasn't sure about that at the time. So I was like, I really thought like the entire last half hour was any given moment of that sequence could have been the last scene. Like I thought he was going to die. I really did. And that just made it so much of the ending stressful for me. Like when he got to the
Yeah.
car and he like I feel like most horror movies is you feel or you feel stressed because you don't want the character to die, and you kind of s- no, you know they're gonna make it out, but you're still nervous about it. But in this case, I was nervous because I was convinced he was gonna die. I really
Yeah.
thought Eli was just gonna, like, yeah, to be fair, this is a similar movie, I think, to House of a Thousand Corpses, mostly in the use of comedy, and that's a movie where everybody dies, and so I thought that's what was gonna
Yeah,
happen
it's
here.
also a movie with like 20 endings and a shitty
Yeah,
pacing and
exactly.
structure. But I think Eli Roth is actually good at structure here and good at pacing. And of
I mean,
course,
he's
instead of
such
killing your
naturally.
main guy at the end, he turns him into the hunter. You know, he,
Yeah,
he goes most dangerous game, but like Asian. Like, you're absolutely right. At the end of
it's
this movie, it turns into a revenge heroic fantasy pretty quick.
after like an extended 25-minute escape sequence that
Yeah,
which is
like,
really
oh
well
God.
structured. It's really well structured, the escape.
Well, I think we have like doomer horror now, to be quite honest. Like, what would happen today is if he left the car to go back inside, he would get killed, and little Asian girl would like get away.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah,
we'd
yeah.
be trade off leads again.
Um,
Um,
I could see that. I could see
because
that.
I think that, like, yeah, we're doing, like, you're right. There's a lot of '90s qualities to horror these days, but it's just so pessimistic and like needlessly so. But it tries to be triumphant in its pessimism, which I just think is an insincere thing to do.
Oh yeah, I mean,
I think you're right.
I well, yeah, I think movies like uh, I don't know, like anything Ari Aster makes
I
are
was
like
specifically thinking
overwhelmingly
of of Midsummer when I was
pessimistic.
saying that.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
and I do not like that movie, but
But how insincere that movie's triumphs are, like, compared to how sincere Screams are, or even
yeah,
this film right here. It's not really a triumph. I mean, we are getting more and more a bit more, I don't know, nihilistic or pessimistic about it because
it's a different kind of pessimism from today,
it
though.
is.
It's a
Well, it's
because the
really, I
pessim
think, if we can talk lofty about Roth for a second, it's like America has been exposed to this kind of violence. We've seen this kind of violence. We're desensitized. We are now Paxton. We have to live with this.
I think that's accurate. I think Eli Roth's mantra is just be honest about it.
Yeah.
You know, he again, like every one of his movies, the very things that make people accuse him of being a reactionary or being poor taste or being offensive, being, you know, all those things are true, but they're also things he's accurately calling out. It's why I think Josh is such a shitty person and why he's
Yeah.
right to think Josh is a shitty person. But the joke there is, of course, that in any other movie, Josh would be an unambiguously good person.
Oh, yeah.
But Eli Roth hates that shit. Um, but yeah, it's a different kind. It's a different kind of pessimism, of cynicism, in
Hmm.
which, you know, today the cynicism is that like you're I don't know what to call it. Like there's no real victories, but whereas this it's
Yeah.
like kind of victories that come at a cost.
Well, this one's really easy. I mean, not easy. I meant to say interesting. I don't know. It's the film's easy on the eyes. I like the way it's put together, but I think it's
Yeah.
interesting so far as the return and torture porn is. 'Cause I think like we've returned at this point because I don't even see a remnant of postmodernism here. I don't even feel
No,
irony here, really.
no, no, it's just a bunch of people go somewhere and they get fucking killed.
Yeah,
And
you like you
that's
brought up
that's it.
cynicism, and this isn't like this is like you said a completely different kind of cynicism, like a morbid cynicism. It's not.
It's the cynicism of, again, the movies he grew up on. It's the
Yeah.
cynicism of Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's the idea that the world doesn't give a shit about you and you might just go somewhere and die and that's it. And there's no meaning to it.
We,
Which is why I think it's effective the reason people die in this movie, which is that people pay to kill people. You
yeah.
know, the death is a commodity now.
Well,
It
except for our. Oh no, go on. Death is a
Oh yeah, yeah,
commodity
yeah.
now. That sounded interesting.
No, I think you're getting at the final death, the
The
Paxton.
bubblegum gang.
Oh yeah, the bubblegum game.
Yeah,
Aside from
I,
that,
I don't
the
think I was
big
going
death.
where you were.
No, I
Yeah,
thought you were referring about the revenge element. No, yeah,
yeah.
it's just it's a death as a commodity, death as a statistic, death as a number, which is the
Well, I
way
mean,
death works in
technically,
the trope.
Paxton. Yeah, you're right. Death is a number. Death is a commodity, and Paxton did pay the Chicklet kids to kill those guys.
Exactly. And for the record, what the fuck with the chick? I told you beforehand that that scene reminded me like it seemed like something out of a like the Tom Hopper, whatever his name is, Tom Hopper, Les Mis, or like a Hollywood musical. I expected them to burst in a song. The way it was framed, it was so strange.
Well, that's another
It's
Eli-ism. In Cabin Fever, there's this crazy, like rabid, like rabies-infected kid named Pancakes, and he just does karate and screams pancakes and bites people. And in here you have a whole fucking team, a whole group of like homicidal maniac children who will do anything for bubble gum, and everyone drives around in their car with like
oh,
garbage bags full of gum.
and it's the way it's framed too. There's this weird Dutch angle. I half expect to see like a Kermit puppet in the corner. Like it's so
Yeah.
weird. It's so weird. I didn't know what he was trying to do. I don't know why they were written into the plot. They're not necessary really for the plot. Like they could have figured it out without them.
Mm-hmm.
It's so funny.
I do want to backtrack and engage more with what you were just saying about death as a commodity, and I think
Oh
that might
yes.
also be such a huge difference between, like, it's no secret I love the '90s, and I love the pre 9/11 slashers so much, and I don't think that those deaths are commodities. In fact, there's like way too much value placed on each individual character,
I
and
think it makes sense.
yeah, and I think like return, like going back to form. I can't tell you how many times I've seen Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but I also can't tell you a single character's name, probably outside of the killers. Like they're just co- commodities in my head, are
And it
stand-ins.
makes
They're
sense in
just
that film because it's on some level about factories, about labor. It's a super interesting movie, but it turns people into cattle, their property.
hmm
So I think it makes sense. Like in the '90s, you talk a lot about say like Columbine, things like
hmm
that, like events that really shook people. And there was like in the '90s, I guess events like that had a human quality, like names and
yeah,
faces that you could associate. But then you get to the 21st century, you get to 9/11, you get to again Abu Ghraib, and it's just this anonymity, this
yeah.
the death stops having the human factor, and it just becomes something that it's something reported on the news. It's a number. You don't really have that connection, which makes sense that he returns to Texas Chainsaw because it was a movie made about you know
Good God, then
Vietnam.
how?
Vietnam. It's like the death is no
Oh
longer meaning.
fuck.
Yeah,
So that means I think we're headed for an even more brutal return. Because, I mean, speaking personally, you see the new COVID deaths, for instance. You
that's why
just
I'm.
get to the point where it's 365 days in, and you're just reading new numbers every day, and it becomes so commodified. It's gamified at this point when you're comparing and contrasting.
Yeah,
And
that's
you,
why I said yesterday that I don't know what he's gonna do, Eli Roth, because I'm sure he's planning something with his Borderlands money,
yeah.
but he the same way he was probably planning something with his clock in the wall money. But no,
Well, that's
I
why
can
I think
definitely
of
see
like
something.
outside of The Witch. I think modern horror has failed us pretty largely.
It's
Um,
fairly apolitical, I would argue, in a lot of ways. I think
I call that a
obviously
failure because like even those fucking
the most political horror filmmakers right now are the filmmakers that started in the early 2000s
like
already.
Freddy's Revenge was political. Like
Yeah. Oh
it's
yeah.
like insanity that we're so apolitical now, and yet that would be so acceptable if we chose to be so.
Yeah, it's I think part of it is
You don't have to be overt. Freddy's Revenge wasn't overtly
yeah, yeah,
political.
yeah, 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 but it's always there. You watch the second Nightmare on Elm Street and the
hmm
subtext is pretty clear to us now, but
Yeah,
it's not necessarily insisted upon in the film itself. Same thing like you watch Friday the 13th and it's, the is it a conservative movie or is it a critique of conservatism that.
and I get that
So
we have like Get Out and Us
oh
and
yeah,
things
and
like
I actually
that.
really like Jordan Peele. I think he's a
I
pretty
do
interesting
too.
filmmaker.
Outside of Jordan Peele and one Robert Eggers movie.
Yeah,
Uh,
and again, like I would say, like whether you think they're intelligent films or not, or effective films or not, I think Rob Zombie and Eli Roth are still very political, like regardless
I
of how
think
effective
they're
they are at it.
uh, I think they're kind of irrelevant.
Oh, to a degree, yeah. Zombie's still going, but his movies are, and I like what he's doing, but they're not, you
Yeah.
know. making
which is
bank
fine. I mean, these
anymore.
guys, uh, there's
Think,
always like one fucking Superman from each generation, and James Wan was the one from there who can still,
yeah, he's the one that survived.
yeah, he can still do just fucking anything and make bank and critical
Yeah,
acclaim.
Zombie
But
was doing great in
he
the
was,
2000s, and now he's getting funding on, Kickstarter for movies, or at least he
yeah,
did with
exactly.
31, not
But
Movie from
it's
Hell.
fine. Someone has to carry the torch from them. I just don't like, as you said, like I said, I like that Eggers movie, but I don't think I like Eggers overall. Like I don't like the Eggers or the Astors or
I don't either.
a lot of the new people we got going on.
And I don't want to sound like old guard for saying that, or like a roundabout conservative, which is a funny thing to say about movies like Texas Chainsaw, but like it's more
It's
the
just like,
sentiment that they're made with. It feels like
yeah. And if Eli
it,
Roth can make something this like that engages with headlines like this does, or interesting topics, then I think anyone can do it. Eli
yeah,
Roth
because
is literally the frat boy filmmaker.
and he upset people, and I think that's because there's the reason that horror is consistently like accused of being conservative. If you go back to like again stuff like Friday the 13th, early
Mhm.
Halloween, like is it endorsing or promoting conservative values on like how women should act, or is it like criticizing that very thing, or is it doing both? And I think that's a very Eli Roth thing, is like I said, it's have his cake and eat it too. He's
Yeah.
being a complete reactionary, but also there's the truth to what he's doing. You know,
And I don't
the
charge like the film with being conservative, because
no, it's
but
him. It's him, because you watch something like Green Inferno, and it's a movie that has been accused of being racist, and
well,
rightfully
no,
so. But
yeah.
it's also a movie that the main target of its criticism is,
I mean,
upper
just
middle
so far
class
as
white
like,
people.
yeah, that archetype of the virginal final girl living, I just think is, I think most horror filmmakers are actually pretty to the left, and I think that one of the scariest thing for teenagers is, oh shit, mom and dad in the church are right, and this was
Yeah,
just supposed to scare you. Um,
it's, but I do think that's all why horror is different now. It's because it doesn't
yeah,
have that contradiction, that conflict, that thing that annoys people or upsets people. Eli Roth works because he made headlines and people accused him of being a bad influencer, of, promoting torture or
absolutely, and like
censoring.
Scream really freed them up to make your final boy just a fucking frat boy horn dog.
Yeah,
Like, oh
it's,
shit.
I don't know, it's just, I guess there's not as many horror movies that are uncomfortable for people.
No, there
It's
aren't.
almost too easy to like, which is weird because you watch something like The Witch and it's very aesthetically pleasing, but then it's like pleasing to what point that it's not bothering you anymore? It's more like an
Yeah,
aesthetic thing. You find it pleasurable, whereas like Eli
I
Roth
do
is not
think the
particularly.
I do think the witch is a bit of an anomaly in the idea that I think it does work
Yeah,
in a
I
pretty
actually
scary
do.
way, and the whole triumph at the end I think is a sincere triumph, and it's cool.
Yeah, it's one of the
Compare
few
that
movies
to
from the books I like.
Midsummer, and it's night and day. And I know that that sounds like a literal pun, and maybe it should be one, but it's like night and day between the two films. Of one is sincere, the other one is kind of
Didn't
frustrating.
think through the implications of the images he's showing, which is, I think, the recurring trend of Aster. Which, to be fair, like you could argue, Eli Roth does the same thing, but the implications he provokes, I think, are more provocative.
I mean, I
Whereas,
think Roth and Zombie are far more inspiring than any of the people we got today, and
oh
maybe from the
yeah,
generation previous too, because
uh,
there's nothing really ornate, ostentatious, overcomposed about Eli Roth's style.
no,
Like you can imagine making a film like this. Like he can talk you into wanting to be a filmmaker. He was one of those Robert
that's
Rodriguez types.
that's what I said. I was on Twitter last night that I think if you're interested in being a horror filmmaker, I don't think you should look to people like Aster. I think you should look to people like
No.
Zombie and Eli Roth. Not necessarily if you agree with like the kinds of movies they're making, but just because the way they got into it, which
Yeah.
is they really like fucking love horror movies, and they started making horror movies, and they did it on low budgets, which is how people were doing in the 80s and 70s. Like God, Toby Hooper, look at notoriously horrible shoot for Texas Chainsaw Massacre on very little money. Everyone
Yeah,
hated him. Everyone
everyone
hated the
vomiting
experience.
uncontrollably.
And it's one of the most universally loved horror movies ever
Mhm.
made, like since goddamn
Yeah.
Nosferatu. Like it's
It's
great.
one of the best movies ever made. It
It
really.
is, and it's a movie made through a difficult process for people that didn't know it was gonna succeed, and that's how
And I
every
think
every zombie
honestly,
shoot has been pain.
I'm really into Williamson. Think he's awesome, but I do think horror got a little too heady, a little too uh,
It was a very rapid shift. Like it
yeah,
went from 0 to 11 in
yeah.
about 5 years flat.
I think it got
It's
a bit too intellectualized, and not in the Aster way, but in I think a good way, personally.
it,
But
good or bad, it just did it too fast. It
it did.
which it makes sense though, given the type of movies those are, because the whole point is that every movie now has to say we're not like that other movie, and then you make
Yeah,
the next one, you say we aren't like that one, and you go from Scream to Urban Legend Final Cut. It's constant escalation until you hit the wall, and you have
and then
to
it's yeah, it eventually stops being frightening because
and then you have to start cutting off people's toes with pliers because
yeah,
that's what do you do next? What do you
that
do
is
next?
exactly what you do next.
It is, but I'm regardless still interested in how horror is going to change.
Oh,
But
I think that's the most fascinating thing about horror. A lot of it you could only tell in retrospect. Like,
oh
I
yeah,
have a
because
video
right now,
going up, and like you and I have talked about what the fuck 2010's horror represented, like as a manifesto. I have a video just asking people what they, because I don't have a theory, really,
no,
until
and
yeah,
I was thinking recently like that I feel the aesthetics of current horror are so I don't know homogenized, so clean cut that it's hard. I can't really imagine the style changing anytime soon. But I say
yeah,
that, but we've gone through maybe 3 or 4 distinct eras since I was born.
yeah.
So I'm most likely wrong about that. I'm most likely wrong. I hope I'm wrong about it, but
Sometimes you
um,
can only see it in retrospect, and that's what that's
yeah,
when it gets kind of wild.
yeah,
Um,
very much.
it's weird, but I feel like when Hostel was released, people immediately knew what they were seeing, like what Eli Roth was trying to express. I feel like it was pretty immediate,
Yeah, um,
and
and
it's weird with something that visceral and that noticeable hits an audience so hard
I
because
now I
most
wasn't.
times audiences don't want to think about anything that's going on in their actual lives, even when they're at a horror movie. Like part of the return was about escapism, and Eli Roth isn't giving that to us anymore.
No,
No.
and I absolutely not. I mean, he kind of teases you with it and then says no. But and it is interesting because how old was I when this came out? Without doxing myself, I was a kid when this came out, so I wasn't watching horror movies. I was probably like 9 when this came out, and but I knew, like there
Yeah.
was this sense that I knew that this was the type of movie that horror movies were, even if I didn't consciously know that. Like when I thought like, what are people who watch horror movies watching? I think the vision I had in my head was something like this,
Yeah.
something like Devil's Rejects, something like Saw, and I just assumed that's what horror movies were. I had no idea about like the landscape of like 90s horror until I was in my later teens. I didn't know about that. I just assumed horror was this. This is what horror movies were like, and that's why I didn't watch them as a kid because it scared me. But uh, there was that way in which like the culture just you knew like this is how everybody was thinking whether they watched them or not. And so I agree that I think people knew going in, kind of to some
Yeah.
degree.
Torture porn is unique in that it got away with like being hyper literal about its metaphors. And I don't think they get away with that most of the time. I really
Yeah,
don't.
less so now, but I think that's less to do with the culture per se and more
Well,
to
I think if
do
it's
with
less
like
so now, it's like more like than thank you, Eli Roth and fucking James Wan. Thanks. We can be more exact about what we're saying.
yeah, and to be fair, it's this was an extremely low budget movie, so it's not like the studios were like, oh, we're gonna give Eli Roth, $50 million and see what happens. I think this was made on like $2 million. This was
Yeah.
made below average, budget for movies. So literally far below average budgets. I don't know what Zombie was working with, but also Zombie was in tight with like Weinstein and all that. So I think he
Yeah,
got a little luckier with his budgets than Eli probably did. Of course, Eli was part of the Tarantino crowd, so
yeah, exactly. It had to
he was
be
part of the
connected.
nobility of the low budget indie sphere. Yeah,
Yeah, and Tarantino was connected to the Weinsteins.
Eli talked about how like he talked to Quentin Tarantino and suddenly he had like five professional grade like screenwriters that are like
I,
helping him write Hostel, this
I
movie he
saw
wrote in 2 weeks.
I saw an interview with Eli Roth when he was like, Hostel was like born of, I'll go over to Quentin's house and every night we would just chill out in his swimming pool in his hot tub and just talk about horror movies. I'm like, whoa, why?
Oh, you can tell how the first half of this movie was written. It's
Yeah,
that energy. I think Paxton and Josh are based on Eli and Quentin.
I think
Just
so.
guys being bros. I don't know who
Oh, I
Ollie is in
hope
this.
Quentin's Ollie. I really hope
Yeah,
Quentin's
I
the
was
king of
gonna
the
say
sling.
I don't know. I don't know who Ollie is in this, but it's probably Quentin. And
Or
then I don't.
Robert Rodriguez. It's
Yeah, no.
whoever.
Robert Rodriguez is Paxton. Eli is
Yeah,
Josh because Eli was the bright-eyed, bushy-tailed one of the crew, and and Quentin would show up and he was the king of the swing. God, what a
good
weird
God,
time for
man.
movies. Because God, he was making Kill Bill at this point in time.
It should be said that Hostel 2 isn't a bad movie as
I haven't
well.
seen it yet. My I have a good friend also named Jacob who likes it more than the first one. He recommended it to me, but
I like
I
the
don't know.
first one more, but I have a lot of like sentimentality with Hostel 1. A lot of nostalgia for it. And I think it's also Natalia fucking kills it. And I love when Eli pokes out his head every once in a while. Like I love that Paxton runs over that group of kids. I just remembered the one with the thing on his lip. He was quite a character. But he
Oh, yeah, God, what was his name? They name him, I think.
yeah, they do.
Oh
I
God,
don't know. But these guys, all they needed was like, you want to see girls like this? You gotta go
oh, it's
here. Like,
it's Alex. His name was Alex. Yeah,
like
yeah, Alex was.
all they needed was to see some fucking pictures of some naked
It
chicks, and they're like, we're
it's a
going.
real it's a real like Alice in Wonderland thing during that whole thing. Like this magical man leads them down this wormhole of horrible things. And then
And I do
he
think it's
takes the train to go to the same place like a week later. It's so weird. It's so
and I do
weird.
think it is kind of cool. Like I like the shit that Roth did some cool fucking shit. Like it makes up for any any cringe any part of the cringe factor when they first enter the room and they see the two girls like getting dressed, Natalia and Svetlana, to when Paxton goes back up to the room
Oh,
after
and
he's
they do
supposed
the
to have
same
been
thing again.
kidnapped. Yeah, but it's two different girls who just basically look like stand-ins for the one that we just saw. Like it probably is their stunt doubles, you
Yeah.
know, like walking out of the room.
And they
That's pretty
repeat the same
cool.
lines. Yeah, it's good. It's good.
And what? No, I was saying when Paxton runs over the three of them, you can tell like Eli Roth's like, yeah, but Natalia's like the bitch, right? She's the worst. So I gotta show her getting run over again.
Oh, Eli Roth hates her.
He hates her so much. I don't know what
He
European chick broke his heart, but it's her. It's her. And I love her
God.
because I can feel the venomous hatred. I mean, she gets insisted on like way more. Like I love that scene. I'm gonna go back to it of like that means you're my bitch. The way it's framed with her walking backwards, like leading him to his like she. That's when because with Svetlana, maybe that's a job. I don't know. Maybe she's just making money in a poor fucking country. Natalia enjoys the fact
Yeah.
that Paxton's about to have the worst death possible. She enjoys it.
She wants to show him some fucking art.
I don't want to drink. I want to see
I
some
want to see
fucking
some
art.
art. It's such a good line.
Oh God, Jay Hernandez. That was a good performance. I mean
Is
it.
that who
There's
plays
just
Paxton?
yeah. There's
Yeah.
I have no reason to care about him as much as I did, like pretty, like very immediately. Like when he got up from that restroom, like standing there, like or like the storage closet. All of a sudden, I was like, okay, this is my guy. I'm here for you because I didn't like Josh. Even when I was supposed to care about Josh, I did not fucking like Josh. But in my dreams, when I close my eyes, I can imagine his tendon snapping when he stands up. Jesus
Yeah,
Christ, holy shit.
yeah, that was the part that got me. That was the part.
Ooh, that in theaters,
It's
like
brutal.
holy shit, fuck.
That's rough, very fucking rough. Josh really fucking got it.
Yeah,
If there's someone Eli hates in this movie, again, it's fucking Josh. He
because
hates
Josh is
Josh.
him. Josh is him, and he was like, Natalia broke my heart, but I was a little bitch then. I was Josh. Yeah, take that, you little bitch,
Yeah,
Josh.
he hates
Yeah,
Natalia, but he hates Josh considerably
yeah,
more.
because Josh is the version of him that fell in love with whoever Natalia is. I swear, this
Yeah,
sounds like really reasonable, and I think that I were right. I'm telling you.
God.
And he just ends up writing a hero epic about like his best friend who will never be as cool as.
Yeah, it's again the Jay Hernandez has real like best friend in your comedy movie vibes, and then he
Yeah,
becomes your hero, you know?
yeah, he really
It's
does.
again, it's literally like if one of the side characters in American Pie had to, you know, it's like
It's literally like
um
Carter becoming the hero of Final Destination, which
I
arguably he
was
was.
literally oh no, I was gonna say it's if Sean William
Sean William
Scott
Scott.
was the main character, if like halfway into the movie Devon Sawa just gets decapitated and the rest of the movie is Sean William Scott running around just screaming, I just want to go home.
That
Like
would be
that's
such
what
a good
Hostel
movie.
is. That's what Hostel is. It's great. I mean, that's sort of what House of a Thousand Corpses is.
Yeah, what was your overall opinion of Hostel? Think it's a good horror movie?
Yeah, I mean, again, this is the Jacob comfort zone as far as like what horror I understand or like viscerally feel, I guess. So that kind of probably goes beyond good and bad. It's just I feel this shit in my bones. This
Yeah,
this is the shit that makes sense to me.
you're a bit
It's
more charitable to certain movies from this period than me, but I always have a soft spot for this movie. Like
yeah,
Roth did well, like this is good. This is fine.
again,
I do
it,
think you should be under 20 when you watch it for the first time, and maybe watch it 10 years ago. But
I
what can you do?
if not like yeah, the Eli Roth, you can't say he's not sincere. You can call him an asshole, you can call him a piece of shit and annoying, but at least he's sincere about it.